Hi guys, this is Krista from Sugar Bee Cookies. Welcome to my channel, The Crafted Studio Company. Today we have some decorated sugar cookies to do. We're going to be working through these six designs. This is the pumpkin latte collection that I'm doing for some workshops over the next couple of weekends. I'm also putting together some take-home kits with the link to this video so that people can do this at home. The kits are only available local to the Okanagan in BC, Canada, but the video and techniques are available to everybody. These are just my original sample cookies. So the ones we're going to be doing today might be a little bit different. They might be in a little bit of a different color. Right off the bat, I can tell you the pumpkin's going to be a little bit different, the orange one. The latte cup's going to be bigger. These were hand cut at the time. I now have a cutter for it. Just little things like that. But let's just jump in. I'm going to move these out of the way. And we're going to talk a little bit about the supplies. For the workshop that I'm putting on, everybody's going to get sort of a manual and how-to. We're going to be working through, you know, a welcome. Everybody gets some recipes, all of that kind of thing. They also get some practice sheets to learn and practice royal icing on. Some techniques that are used in this particular set, sort of the basics. And then they're also going to be getting, and we're going to be working through sort of the lesson format for all six of these cookies. I'm not quite sure if that's all in frame, but I have a schedule of which order and which cookie to work on next, because cookies can only be worked on in layers, and sometimes you have to let the layers rest a little bit. So we're going to be starting with the latte cup, and at the same time we're going to be working on the orange pumpkin and then this tan pumpkin. And then once all these are completed, we're going to be moving on to these three cookies. So this is the schedule we're following, and everybody gets that. And then there's step-by-step guides, written and shown in demonstration of a photo. And everybody is going to get this at the workshop and in the kits. This is going to be a download link for people who purchase the kits. And some people learn by watching, some people learn by reading, and some people learn visually by step. So that's how I put this little collection together. So I'm going to be doing that same order today of those cookies as I'm going to be doing in my class. And then we also have, oops, I bumped the camera, I'm sorry. We also have everything that's going to come in the kit. We have icing colors. We have 5 colors, but 2 consistencies of the cream. One is a stiff consistency, and I've made sure to mark that. And that's going to be for our knit pumpkin, because you need a little bit of a stiffer consistency for that. Everybody gets a cloth and a needle tool. I'm going to be using my own scribe tool. It's a little worse for the wear and pretty banged up, but I love this one, so I'm going to be using that. But everybody's going to get a scribe needle tool to work with their icing and pop bubbles. And of course, they're going to get 6 cookies. So we've got a couple of different pumpkins. We've got a latte cup. And then we have a couple of leaf shapes as well. Everybody in the kit is going to be getting some cookies that are actually pre-flat iced. This is simply for time constraints because of layers. But nobody's going to be going home without learning how to actually do the flooding and the technique needed to learn how to do that. So it's just sort of a step for the magic of the workshop and the kits that I can do to help eliminate time, because a flat icing generally needs a couple of hours to rest up enough to do some of these decorating techniques on. So I have my icings already ready here to go. I'm missing a color. What color am I missing? I am missing my tan. I'm just gonna go grab that. Okay, I got my tan icing. These have already been prepped and cut the tips off. We're working with tipless bags. I'm just checking them for our techniques today, but I wanted to show you. So we're taking just the smallest little bit of the bag tip off. You want to work really in small increments here because we want a nice fine line, and I'll kind of show you what I mean here. We're working with a medium consistency icing. Sorry, a medium consistency icing. And what that means is it's about 12 to 15 seconds for the icing to heal when it's rested in a bowl and you draw sort of a knife tip or a tip of something through it, and it takes 12 to 15 seconds for that mark to disappear. That's the heal time. And 12 to 15 seconds is a great sort of all-in-one icing. It gives you the ability to outline, but also flood. And for the sake of courses and workshops and kits, that's what I work with. But when you touch your icing and squeeze and lift and pull, you get a nice thin line. So you want to take the smallest amount off, and I will show you with this bag. I haven't cut this one yet. So I usually flatten the seams if there is a seam in your bag. Some bags have seams. I have icing all over my fingers. Always keep a damp cloth at hand. And you want to start small, and you can always take more off if needed. And test it. Perfect. Well, see, it's breaking a little bit. That is because this is a stiffer consistency. So this is my stiff consistency. You could take just a smidge more off, but because of the technique I'm using this for later with the knit technique on our pumpkin, I'm going to actually leave it as is, because when I squeeze harder, a lot more is going to come out, and I don't need perfect lines to break. Or I don't have to worry about breaking lines. All right. So the first cookie we're going to work on is our latte cookie. And what we're going to be working on is the sections for the sleeve and the lid. So we're going to be working on filling all the different sections and letting things rest in between, and then we'll get to the decorative details. But we're going to be working on the sleeve and the lid. So we're going to be starting with our tan icing. I just had to check my notes to make sure it's following along to the same. And our sleeve is, you can take your needle tool and you can actually just use your needle tool to give yourself a little bit of mark. And I don't know if this is actually going to show up on camera with this lighting. I have very poor lighting today. I do want to say, no, I'm not wearing any gloves. These are sample cookies, but also just wash your hands. Okay, so my hands are nice and clean. I can't tell you how many times in a day I actually wash my hands. Okay, you can see this sample cookie was a lot smaller than my final product, but we're going to be working on this section. So you want to, actually, let's just do a quick little lesson here. You're going to take the icing at the thickest part in your palm, and you're going to gently squeeze till you get a ball or a little bit of icing out. Touch the surface, and you're going to lift away. And as you lift, you let your icing drop. Lift, squeeze as you go, and drop, and then touch back down. These are going to give you nice, smooth lines. The trick is to lift and drop, but lift your icing, and you don't want to like just draw. If you can see, if you try and just draw on a surface, you're going to get a straightish line, but you have less control. Pardon me. Okay, so I'm going to be outlining my sleeve. Let's just make sure I'm in frame. I'm going to touch the surface, lift, and drop down to where I want to. And then I'm going to come down to this edge, touch down, lift, outline, drop, lift. Now some of this is a little difficult because I'm trying to do it for angles of the camera. We're going to outline our lid as well in our brown. And our lid starts up here. I'm going to touch, lift, pull across. And then I'm going to just lift and drop a little bit everywhere I want the icing to sort of to connect. Everybody has a different way of doing this. You'll get comfortable with yours. And if you have any little areas that you need to fix up, just use your needle tool and try not to get a cookie crumb in it. It's okay. We will fix that when we flood it. All right, so we've got those outlines done. And now we're going to flood it. So how we're going to do this is we're going to take our same icing and we're going to squeeze with more firm pressure, and we're going to work around our edge and then towards the center. And it's not going to be perfect. But I'll show you how to fix that. You just keep working around, lots of firm pressure. Your icing is going to flood and fill and fix itself in those areas. But where you have really super thin areas, you can just go in and squeeze a little bit more. You can also use the tip of your icing bag to kind of get in there. Now this will level out. Sorry, the dog next door is going a little bit crazy. All right, she hangs on our fence and she goes a little bit nuts. You're going to just use your needle tool and you're going to do these tiny little whipping motions to move the icing around and get it up against your outline, your borders. And you want to work carefully. I know a lot of videos out there are sped up, so it looks a lot faster. This is not a fast game. This is a slow and steady wins the race. And you can give your cookie just a little shimmy, a little shake to help the icing level, and you'll see any areas that are still a little bit thin that you can go in and fix. And see how, we have little marks that I'm making? Those will level out, but giving it a shimmy will help. Okay. So we're going to go in on our filler lid. I've got little icing bits everywhere. Just start where is comfortable for you. But I usually like to start fairly close to the edge. I don't actually go right up to the edge because, as you can see, when it floods and fills, and then when you use your tool, it will fill in those areas. I'm going to switch directions here. Like I said, this is kind of not as easy to do for the camera as it is to just get in there and lean down and look at what you're doing. All right, I have some super thin areas, so I'm going to go and squeeze some more. The hole on this bag could be just a smidge bigger, but it is working. So one thing I'm always doing in between things is I'm using a damp cloth and cleaning off the tip of my bag. I'm going to use my needle tool to get in there. And I'm using just small little whipping motions. I find that's the easiest. Sort of like whipping eggs or a batter. Kind of angle it on the side, but also allows me to see what I'm doing. And I don't know if that's because I wear glasses or... icing is very unforgiving and forgiving at the same time. So just work slowly And don't forget, it does level itself out because we're working with that medium consistency 15-second icing. I'm just going to give it a little shimmy in there. And if you see any air bubbles, go ahead and use your tool to pop them. Or to fix any little areas. I can still see the light is just hitting this the right way. Okay. All right. We're going to let this one sit and rest for a couple of minutes, and we're going to work on the next cookie. So we're going to just set him aside. And the next cookie we're going to be working on is our orange pumpkin. So our orange pumpkin, in my sample set and my photos, I've done it sectioned, and we're not going to do that for the sake of this class because the sections require time to set up in between every other section. We're going to flat ice this. I also wanted to let people know how they could flat ice for the ones that I've pre-done for them. So nobody's going to miss out on how to do that section because we're going to do it on this pumpkin, which has fewer sections, but it shows people how to do it. So we're going to take our orange icing and we're going to outline our pumpkin. I generally like to start with pumpkins up at the top, in the middle, or close to the middle. I find that's the easiest for me to get the overall shape. And that's the same for when you're doing individual sections on a pumpkin. I always sort of start at the top middle. I am shaking a little bit because I'm trying to show how to do this for camera. And we've just outlined a pumpkin. And we're going to go in and we're going to fill this guy right away. So I got air in my icing. I'm just going to squeeze with firm pressure. And you can see when I stick my tip in the icing and let it bubble up, it kind of stagnates itself. So you want to make sure you just kind of keep lifted above the icing as best as possible. And kind of let it fall into place and then go back and use the tip a little bit to move the icing as needed. And I'm going to work towards the middle. I have icing coming out the top of my bag because I didn't tighten it up. That was that air bubble. I'm going to tell you, decorating cookies is messy. It's fun, but it's messy. Okay, so I'll keep that on the side here. And I'm gonna start working. Sometimes I find it handy to have a toothpick around or another scribed tool. And I actually just hold my cookie with it. You can actually kind of press right in, hold the cookie. And I'm going to work my way around doing that little whipping motion. And to turn the cookie if you need to, you know. If you're working with a little bit of a little turntable, I know a lot of people do. I see that a lot online. I've never really worked with one. I don't find them, I mean, I find the cookie spins just fine on the surface itself. Okay. So this is a little bit lumpy and bumpy. Pardon me. If you can't touch the cookie like without ruining the edges, you can just use your scribe tool. Give it a little shimmy. Try not to press down into the cookie too much. You just want to grab sort of the meat of the cookie. And there you go. All right, and those should fix themselves, but you can give it one more little shimmy if you want. See a couple of air bubbles coming up. See right there, pop. Just use your needle tool to pop it. And we're gonna sit this cookie aside and come back to it. All right. So the next cookie we're going to work on is this sort of tan pumpkin with corking. And we're going to do, these are sort of sectioned into A, B, C, and we're going to do 2 sections and leave one in between. So we've got our cookie, and we're going to pick up our tan icing. You could do this in the cream if you wanted to as well. Man, I got all my icing coming out my tips because I haven't tightened my elastics. You can use little clips too. Those sandwich bag clips are really great. Okay, so we're going to be creating outlining sections, and we're going to again start in the middle even though we're filling out the outside ones. And I'm just making little guide marks. And we're going to be doing this by creating, getting the icing off my fingers. We're going to be starting at the top and creating like this oval section. And you know what? If you do a boo-boo like I just did there, you can see right there. I needed to go a little higher. I couldn't see because of the way the camera setup is. You can just go in over top and do your lines, because this is a medium consistency icing. It is an all-in-one. Now we're going to connect at the top, beside it, and come around and outline our pumpkin. I try not to get too close to the edge if I can, like right there, because you're going to potentially have icing fall off the cookie once you flood it. So always try and come and work a little bit on the inside of the cookie if you can. All right, so we've got it outlined, and we're going to be working on sections A and C. Those are the two that we want to fill right now. We're going to leave this one in between, because if we filled all of them, they're all going to melt together into one section. So I'm going to turn my cookie. You always want to be able to work what's comfortable for you, and I'm just going to start filling it in. I'm going to work around the outside. And come up the other side, and then fill in the section in the middle. I'm really stumbling with my words today. Use your needle tool. Just kind of fill that out. If you want a puffier section, you can feel free to go in and add just a little more icing. Just know that the puffier the section you make, the more risk you have with runoff and falling off the cookie. You also have more risk of cookies cratering and creating holes, because the moisture of the icing is pulled down into the cookie as it dries. There are some tips and tricks that you can do to avoid that. Some people poke holes in their cookies, even if they have a flood layer dried, they poke holes in that. I don't really find that that helps too much. It depends on where you live and the kind of climate that you live in. Some people create squiggle lines before they flood their sections. Let them set up a moment, and then that sort of gives sort of a baffling layer so it doesn't sink. I just tend not to do too many puffy sections. Like the super puffy. I also don't like a ridiculous amount of icing on my cookies. I'm not an icing person. I like the cookie. I'm in it for the cookie, and my cookies taste good. I developed my own cookie recipe. It is a sugar cookie base, but it is a little bit of a hybrid with other types of cookies. So they have a nice soft, little bit of chewy bite. And they stay soft generally. Okay, and we're going to come back in and flood that middle section once that rests up. So that is going to help keep sort of definitive lines and sections. So we're going to sit here on the side. I think I need a sip of my drink here. Hang on. And we're going to come back with our latte cup. And this time we want our cream icing, and you want to make sure that you have your regular one, the same consistency we're working with all the other ones, not the stiff. Okay, so we want to outline the cup portion. So all we're going to do is just next to our sections, we're going to come in create sort of that border on the edge of the cookie. And come around, lift, outline, drop. Now you can come in and do this if you want to. It's not absolutely needed. It depends on the consistency of icings that you're working with. You just want to be really careful of your cookie. And that, once you put the flood in, you can see that gap, it will fix itself. I do find that this does help create a more definitive border at times. This is meant to just be sort of a beginner set, so just do what you're comfortable with and you go in and fill it. It does get a little tricky when you're working up in smaller sections. You can easily go up onto the other sections. So what I recommend is put less icing and use your scribe tool to help move it against that line. Like that. And if you have areas that need just a little bit more, just go and squeeze in a little bit more. And I'm going to go in and squeeze a little bit more closer to the edge here, but not so much that I'm going up right onto that edge. And if you do, not a big deal. I will show you how we correct that later with details. Cookies often look great and not great in between steps. So you'll be super proud of a step and then all of a sudden it'll look like this. Kind of loses its definitive lines, depending how much time you've left in between for it to crust on some layers. Sometimes they melt a little bit, but it's the final details that we put on later that tighten the cookie up. So don't ever worry about how your cookie looks as you go. Just do the steps and you'll see it comes out beautiful. I can't tell you how difficult this is to do under a camera sometimes. Okay. All right. And we have our latte cup all filled in. Now I'm not too worried about that gap that I'm working on right here because we're going to have some decorative details in that area. I'm going to take my scribe tool and just give it a little shimmy, always making sure I put the scribe tool in a currently flooded area. I don't want to pop it in there now that it's started to crust and rust because it'll break the icing. It'll break that beautiful sort of glossy flat finish. Yeah, our latte cup. So we're going to come back and decorate the details on that shortly. We're going to move back to working on our pumpkin, and we're going to add the stem, but we're also going to add some section lines. And then we're going to be working on the tan pumpkin with some sections. Okay, so this ideally would want to set up a little bit longer. So hopefully my lines don't melt right in. I am working a little bit fast for the sake of the camera. I'm going to work on my little stem here, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze and do a zigzag up and down, nothing fancy. The icing's going to melt into itself, but it might leave a little bit of texture. Depends on how thick your icing is. If you have a stiff consistency icing handy, the stems are a great place to use a stiff consistency because then you get all that texture out of the lines that you just put in. Okay, so I'm going to start at the top. I always end up starting on the right top side. I'm going to curve down, touch down at the bottom. I always start in the middle on pumpkins because it gives me the best overall shape. It helps me remind me where everything goes and all the curves. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to come to this side. All we're doing is just creating a little texture. And I can fix that in a moment, that little blip. That little blip. And I think I'm going to do an outline just on the outside too. You can actually come around, connect them all if you want a full outline. And I'm just going to use my scribe tool to pick up that little bit of icing that I blipped down. You can also just use your scribe tool very carefully to fix any little boo-boo areas. Now I'm not too worried up here because I'm going to be adding some leaves and decorative details to this after, like that. Okay, we're going to set him aside. And we're going to work on our tan pumpkin with corking. Corking is the little bumps and sort of warts that you get on a pumpkin. Okay, and now we're going to fill in this middle section. Now you can see I have this, I'm going to start up here just to make sure that that's filled in where I had that boo-boo I fixed. I'm going to tighten my icing bag. I made the mistake of cutting off the tops for the sake of the video, otherwise it comes up into the camera. So you can see I'm leaving a space. I'm trying to do that as much as possible, otherwise I risk going right over top of the other section. I will fix that with the needle tool after, and it'll help level itself out too, so between leveling itself out and the needle tool, it'll do its thing. All right, so I'm going to come in here. And I'm going to use that needle tool. And you can see I'm working away from the edge, but because I'm using a little whipping motion, it's pushing it to the edge. It's using the force of the icing for itself. And I can see I need a little bit more icing in my section, but I'm going to do this first and come back and fix that. If you have too little, you won't be able to use this motion to get it up to the edge. So you do want to make sure you have enough. And I can see it just needs a little more. So just go ahead and squeeze a little more in. Just clean it up and it will level out. Give it a shimmy, shimmy, shimmy. And then touch up. And that's how you do sections. I'm going to add a little bit of a stem to this, and I'm just going to go up. And I'm going to squeeze. Yeah, the hole in my brown icing needs to be just a smidge bigger. And I'm going to, there we go. So that guy is going to rest for a few minutes, and then we're going to come back and put some details on. All right, so this guy, our latte cup, we're going to put some of our accents on. So in the book that I've created, we're now going to work on the leaves and then the orange berries and then, or the orange sort of seeds. And then we're going to put on the little berries. And the way we're going to do the green leaves is just by sort of drawing a couple of lines with our icing. We're going to start in the corner and come up with one line, up, up to about there. I'm going to come up with another line to about there. And I'm going to off branch to here. And then we're going to use those guides to draw leaf marks. Just generally little leaf shapes, and they can be different sizes, like that. And then we're going to come in and we're going to fill those shapes. And then you guessed it, we're going to use our scribe tool to move that icing around. Now you want to be careful, the icing underneath is still soft. You can kind of pull the tip of your leaf if you want a little more elongated. Voila, we have leaves. And while that one is resting a little bit before we put on our orange seeds, we're going to come in and we're going to sort of give some definition to the rest of the cup. So I'm going to take my brown and I'm going to outline the bottom and clean up that edge. This is that magic of final details I said. We'll clean everything up and you can see how beautiful that is. And you can create maybe a section line in the middle just for a little texture. And I'm going to come up and I'm just going to outline the top. It's not actually needed right now the way I did the cookie, but outlines can be partial or full all the way around. It's up to you. And it just cleans it up a bit. You can see that that line in the middle is much cleaner. You can go back on the video and take a peek, but it's much cleaner now. And I'm going to come in with my tan and do the same thing on the bottom of the cup of the tan before I put on more details. And I'm going to go part way up. I gotta clean my tip. Okay. I'm gonna go part way up the cup here. I'm not gonna worry about this side. And I'm actually not gonna worry too much about across. I think I'm gonna use my cream to outline this side of my cup and then clean up that line. And I'm going to go part way up there. And that's what I meant. You don't need to do full outlines. Less is sometimes more. You just want the idea for the eye to kind of see. Just using my scribe tool to, I should have done this before the leaves. You just need a little bit of definition for the eye. You don't have to go all the way around, but it's your own preference. See, I'm not going to go all the way around there. And I'm just going to create like a little cup bottom here. Super simple. Okay, we're going to let that rest for a moment, and then we're going to come back and do the orange seeds. So we're going to move on to our orange pumpkin, and we're going to create the leaves on that. We're going to do this effect with orange leaves, or sorry, green leaves. I'll leave that right there visually, if that's even in shot. Okay. And I'm just going to come in and I'm going to create a line where I want. Then I'm going to create little section lines. Don't worry if it breaks because you're putting leaves over top of that. Kind of just staggering leaves here and there. Might do one right there. And then you're going to come in and you're going to outline. You want to make them all different shapes. Sorry, all different sizes. You want the same general shape. And if you need to fix up any lines, go ahead. And I always try and leave a little bit of the stem of the leaf instead of working right up to the vine. Depends which kind of leaves you're doing, but that one you can go right up. And then we're going to fill them in. I'm just going to add some icing. And again, the icing underneath is still really soft, so this is going to melt into it just a little bit. But you also don't want to jam your tip or your needle tool down into that cookie, because then you'll muck it up. And they don't need a lot of icing. Now when I'm putting on details, you'll notice I don't shake the cookie as much, like the shimmy. This is because you don't want to disrupt the icing that is crusting over and setting. Moving a cookie too much when it is drying can make it all crack. You only want to do the shimmy and shake for the flood sections, or if sections in between are completely dry. Yeah. And then we can go right in and add some little berries. And we're going to just squeeze near on the stem. They don't have to be perfect. A couple of areas. I like to do offsets of 3, 1 and 2, depending. I think I'm going to do a little guy up there, and I'm going to do 2 up there. And just go in and tap, tap, tap any little. And we're going to let that crust and rest. I got a little. Clean your needle tool in between things. You will drop other colors into colors. And I'm going to come back after and put on some lines for that to make them pop some on the leaf. Okay, let's come in with our tan pumpkin and the corking. So we're going to add, you can use, again, depending if you did this in the cream or the tan, it's up to you. You can offset and do the corking and another off color if you want to. But I'm going to come in. Oh, I got to clean my tip. I can tell the icing's coming out funny. Okay, just add little bumps. And we're going to leave the section up here for some details. Make them all different sizes. And if you have any little boo-boo areas, that's where you can cover it up. Voila. Some corking on the pumpkins. Now we're going to come in right away. And I'm actually going to create some of these orange seeds. You can see they're layered underneath our leaves. So I'm just going to create, starting from the top, a line down to there. And I'm going to probably come in and do a little line here, part way. And I'm going to offset a couple of stems. And I think on this one, I'm going to do 2. I try and work in odd numbers. It's just a design technique. And I'm actually going to flip my cookie around because I find it's easier. And we're going to create little teardrops. So we're going to squeeze a tiny little dot and pull it back onto the stem. Tiny little dot, pull it back onto the stem. And if you're comfortable doing this when you make the stems, go ahead and do that. I'm just trying to show it in different layers for people so that they can adapt their own techniques. And I'm just using my scribe tool to kind of pull and move the icing where I want it to. But don't forget, I'm putting some other details on top of that. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, and we're going to let him set before we do any of the green leaves and berries on him. So we're going to come back to our latte cup. Okay, so for a latte cup, I'm going to add my orange seeds. And I'm doing this sort of over top. You can see on this one, I went over top, which is why I put my green down first. You always want to think in the layers. But first and foremost, I'm going to come and I'm going to do a couple of those little stems right there. And I'm going to squeeze and pull back just to create those little, carefully use your scribe tool. Now I'm putting some brown berries thereafter, so that's okay if it's not perfect. And squeeze and pull, squeeze and pull. And you can see I'm always working away from the other stem, because if you go too close, it's going to all melt together. And I'm going to come right over top and create a couple of little layers. And this one I'm going to try and do, I think I'm going to leave it at that. I can see, you want to look at your icing, what it's doing as you go. Try and put on too much, it becomes too busy and it all melts together. And you can come in, and I'm going to create some berries. Just squeeze in some dots, and I'm going to work away from the other one. And squeeze and it'll grow. Work away from that one. Squeeze and let it go. And if you want, you can come in. I could have probably done this before I added the seeds, but you can come in and add a couple of lines just for some definition, and your latte cup is done. We're going to set him aside, and we're going to come in and we're going to just add some little lines to our orange pumpkin. Now I can see my icing is sinking into the icing underneath a little bit. It's still defined enough, but that's because I didn't let the orange set up enough before I worked, because I'm still trying to make sure I get this in on time on the camera to show sort of as much real time as I can. But sometimes it just needs an extra 5 minutes, and that's it. Okay, and your orange pumpkin is done. I'm going to move him aside. I'm going to come back. Pardon me, a little sip of my drink. And we've got our corking pumpkin. And I'm going to create 3 little leaves here. Now you don't have to do this number. You can do whatever you want. You can make your leaf shapes a little wonky if you want. You want to look at placement. You want layers to go different ways, so this one is a little lower. Okay, turn my cookie a little bit. Leaves don't have to be perfect. They just need to give you the general idea, and you can always use your scribe tool to move the icing and fill it out a little bit differently if you want. And you can always go back in and just add a little more icing for that nice little puffy. And sometimes I don't worry about flattening my icing either. Like you can see, I'm leaving a little texture in there, and if that texture stays, I'm okay with it, because leaves generally have a lot of texture. All right, and then I'm going to take my brown, and we're going to create some berries, and we're going to hide sort of those joints and seams. Decorative details is where it all pulls together, because you can hide anything you're not quite happy with. And it's optional, but you can come back in and add veins to the leaves here too once this just sets a little bit. I'm actually going to pull that with me. But those are the first 3 cookies in this collection. Well done, everybody. We will work on the next 3 cookies in the next part. Hi guys, okay, we're going to work on the next 3 cookies, and these are our cookies that are already pre-iced. And this was for the timing of the workshop, and to be able to do sort of all the cookies in one sitting as best as possible. So first, we're going to work on our leaves and our leaf stems. We're going to leave the knit pumpkin for last. He can actually be done just on his own. And we're going to work on these ones. I can see air bubbles that I didn't pop, but that's okay because we're going to be decorating over top. We're going to start with the smaller one, okay? And this one is going to be just kind of like this. It's going to be a couple of different colors. And these ones are actually really simple. We left the sort of more technical ones for the first 3 so that people kind of learn certain techniques and get comfortable with things, and then kind of just go in and do what their heart desires with these ones. For the sake of the video, I'm going to just follow the pattern that I preset. But we're going to come in and we're going to outline. I'm going to clean my icing tip. And we're going to create a line from bottom all the way up to the top. You can curve it, you can wiggle it, you can do whatever you're comfortable with here. And we're going to leave some bare spots for orange leaves. And you can see here, I've actually I'm not following the shape of the cookie, and that's okay. You don't have to. As long as you can make it fit, that's all that matters. I'm going to put a leaf there. I'm going to come in and put a leaf there. And one right there. Okay, so I'm leaving some spots for orange leaves. I'm going to come in, I'm going to turn my cookie. Always turn your cookie to where you're comfortable. And you're going to just outline your leaf. And you make the leaf shapes however you want. And you can work on whichever ones you're comfortable with. They don't have to be perfect. Like that one didn't have a point to it, but I'll come in and fix that. I'm going to be honest, I don't normally work with tipless bags. I find I don't have as much control, just simply because I'm used to using tips and couplers. But tipless bags are great for beginners, or if you have a super high quality tipless bag that doesn't have the seam in it, because that seam can actually affect your icing, how it comes out. I'm just going to come in and fill these. I'm adding just a little bit of extra icing for a puffy leaf. Use my scribe tool. And you can see that that icing is just leveling itself down, which is beautiful. So it means that you have the right consistency. Consistency is everything with cookie decorating. You know, I get people coming up to me all the time saying, oh, I could never do that. I'm like, absolutely, absolutely, yes, you can. It's all in learning about your consistencies with icings. And I can see that my stem was broken here, so I'm just going to use my scribe tool to pull it. I have a bubble right there. I can also see where I had bubbles. That's actually a funny bubble mark, but again, we're going to be putting a leaf over top of that, so that's okay. Now we're going to come in with our orange. and create a couple of spots for orange. And I'm going to squeak just a little baby one in there. And this one, because he's small, you can actually just create the leaf by doing a dot and pulling. And then just shaping it how you want with your needle tool. You can actually do that for a lot of them generally if you have a thinner icing like this. For the larger ones, it's best outline. It just gives a guide for your icing to flood to and not continue on. And that's how quick and simple it is to do a leaf stem. And you don't have to have a pre-flooded base on these. You don't have to have that white cream layer underneath. You can do this just on the raw cookie. And if you wanted to, you could go back in and add some of those like little brown berries and stuff, but we're going to be doing that on this one. So I'm going to sit this one aside, and then we're going to come back and kind of add some, oh, see, my icing was starting to crust, and it's going to be harder to fix now. But I felt like the tip just wasn't right there. So, all right. We'll come back in once this crusts a little bit better, and we're going to add some veins to that on the leaves. We'll sit that aside. All right, so now we're going to be working on this one. This one's going to have seeds and berries and stuff on it. And we're going to start with our green, and then we're going to work to our brown. You can also see that this cookie was a little bit wider than this one when I baked them out. Used a slightly different cutter. Okay, so we're just going to come in, touch, lift, and I wasn't consistently squeezing there. So you can see I broke my line, but that's okay because we're adding so much detail to this cookie, and I'm coming right in here with a leaf anyways. It's all going to hide in the end. And if you find it easier to start at the top and pull to your line, you can do that too, whatever you're most comfortable with. I'm going to leave this area down here for, see, that's why it's so important to clean your tips as you go. And I like to actually pull and squeeze a little bit of icing out because sometimes it gets clumped up in there as it dries on the tip. And I goobered it here. I won't call it goober, but again, it doesn't matter because I'm going to be layering things over top of it. So I'm going to just stick with the 5 leaves. I always work in offset numbers as best as possible. Like you'll notice there's 5 leaves, there's 7 berries. It just visually for a design purposes looks better. Okay, so I'm going to come in, gonna outline my leaves. And they don't have to be perfect, but do different sizes. You'll also find that working with your icing bag is going to change as it gets less in it. And I'm already working with bags that have much less in them. You want your bag to be a little bit fuller. And I'm really trying to show that you don't have to be perfect, that you can just do, and it's going to end up looking good because of the consistency we are working with. We can really manipulate it and shape it with our needle tool. So don't stress about having the perfect shape and the perfect outline. They can be a little bit wonky and they're going to look great. Ooh, just flew overhead. Don't know if you guys heard that. I live fairly close to an airport, so sometimes we're on the flight path. Okay, so those are our green leaves. And now we're going to come in right away. So some of these cookies you can do from start to finish, and they don't need as much layering. They would need layering if you were to do the flat icing first. But we're going to come in, and I'm going to add some stems. Oh, I need to clean my tip. Some stems for my, I'm going to cut just the tiniest little bit, and I mean tiny, off of that. Barely any, but it does make a difference, and I was struggling with it all along. See, now it's coming out much better. And I'm going to just create a couple little areas where I'm going to put my berries. I'm going to come in. I'm going to put berries there. Might only just do 2 there on this particular one. We'll see. And I think I'm kind of looking at this one. You don't have to follow it exactly. I think I'm going to put 2 pack of berries there. So I talked about offset numbers. Now I've done 2 and 2, but because I have 3 here, we have a total of 7 berries, and it should look pretty balanced when all is said and done. And I'm just going to squeeze a dot. And you can actually really change the position. Like I'm going to go right beside my line here, and it's not going to matter because as it grows, it's going to take over. Those are just guides, and you kind of want them there as a general purpose. I always love adding decorative details. Everything always sort of starts to come together. Okay, I'm going to let this one rest for a moment before I come in with the orange seeds, just to give everything a little bit of time to kind of crust over a bit. And we're just going to come back to this one and add some decorative lines. Now I'm going to use green to outline all my leaves, and you can actually go right back over top of your original stem if you want to. The whole point is just to add some texture. Sometimes it's easier to start from the top of the leaf and come down. Just wherever you want a little bit of extra texture. Just to clean it off. And I'm actually going to be using the green to do my orange ones as well. And the reason why I'm doing that is just to tie the whole cookie look together. It makes it a little more cohesive, but you can do whatever you want. Using my scribe tool just to take off that little bit of tip. And that's why I don't tend to start on the edges of the leaves. You can see these ones came off cleanly, whereas I started here and came down. Kind of sometimes gets a little ball there. I'm going to move him aside. He is done. Let him dry a bit. Okay, so we're going to come back to, oh, I just stuck my finger in a berry. Going to come back to this one, and I'm going to see if I can fix that up a little bit. You want to be really careful when you're moving your cookies around. All right, we're going to come back to him, and I'm going to add some veins on the leaf. I want to make sure I'm in shot here. Also, my light is changing considerably, being the time of year we're at. Okay, so I'm just going to add some texture. Now, this is optional. You don't have to do that. If you like the look of your cookie, just clean as is, without any extra texture on top, you don't have to do it. You can see every time I'm lifting away and letting the icing fall where it's guided instead of trying to draw. All right, so we need to do our orange stems, and we can place these wherever we want. I'm gonna kind of put them in the little gaps, but I'm gonna create little guidelines for myself. And I'm squeezing very gently on these, and these are gonna break a little bit if I'm squeezing so gently, but I really want these to be guides. You can go back in and fix it if you want to. And I actually want to bring this stem all the way down as if it's a spray. A cluster spray. Okay, and then I'm going to come up and I'm going to do one here and here. And that gives me 5. I did a lot more on this one, but the cookie was also a lot wider. And my icing is a bit looser than when I was working on here. So you don't need to squeeze out very much. And I'm just going to fill these in and see how I feel about the overall design. Yeah, I don't like this. I want to add a little bit more in here. I'm going to use my scribe tool. I'm gently pulling through the orange and not through the other icing. I feel like it needs just a little more. And you can layer over top. I'm going to layer right over top of this guy. Pull down seeds wherever I feel it needs it. I feel like up here he would spread out a bit. And you can see my icing's a little loose, so it's kind of all melting together here. I'm going to use my scribe tool to pull some of that icing off, but also to help the definitive lines. All right, feel like it needs a little more maybe up here. I feel like it concentrated it all into the middle. And that's okay. Maybe one right here. I mucked it up right there. That's okay. All right, put that to one side. And he is done. So we're going to work on our knit pumpkin. And this is one that we want the stiff consistency icing for. So we've been saving that stiff consistency for this. We've got our flood already done. If you are doing this at home, just make sure your flood is nice and cured and dried. Okay. So what we're going to be doing is you can use an edible marker for this if you want to, or you can just use your scribe tool. And I'm just going to be making guide marks, sort of the same as with our orange pumpkin. We're just making sort of where lines on a pumpkin would be. I'm keeping it simple. You can get more elaborate with this cookie if you want to, but I've made these guide marks. And again, these are sample cookies and I have washed my hands. I have actually jumped up and washed my hands about 4 times during this video. I just hit stop and edited it together. But you're going to take your stiff consistency icing and you're going to start and you're going to use those guidelines to create sort of more visual guidelines for yourself. And don't worry, I mean, my icing broke there, but you're not going to see these after. These are just giving us a mark as to where we're going to create a knit pattern. And knit patterns are really easy to do. Again, it's about your icing consistency. So knit pattern, we're going to be creating that effect. And I've come right to the edges on this particular cookie. I don't know if I'm going to do that on this one because I think I'm going to add some lines in between. I'm going to do my knit a little bit smaller than this. It all depends on how much you squeeze out as you go. But you've created these guidelines and these are just markers to help you go. And with a knit pattern, all we're going to do is we're going to squeeze a ball, sort of a teardrop, and pull down. Oops. And squeeze and pull down. and you're going to work back and forth. And you can always come in with your scribe tool and fix it. That's essentially what we're going to be doing, just a little bit cleaner on the cookie, hopefully. All right, so for this one, I'm actually going to go in and just cut just a little bit more off of my icing bag. You can actually, we don't want that on there. It's for the garbage, okay. Whew. Make sure your surface isn't wet with where you wipe down when you put your cookie on it, because what's going to happen is your cookie's going to soak that up and start crumbling and get soggy, and nobody likes a soggy cookie. Okay, so again, with all my pumpkins, I always start on an inside line. It's just where I can start that helps me keep the shape of my pumpkin best, especially when we're working on a curve with a texture like this. Still looks wet, but it's not. Okay. And I'm going to start at the top and just squeeze a ball and pull down. And I'm going to squeeze a ball and pull down. And then I'm going to work a little bit lower. And I can actually tell that my icing could be stiffer. And it's warming up in my hand as I work too. But this, it should hold its shape. And as you curve down and come to the bottom, you can see I'm sort of, instead of working continuously, I'm stopping and finding a new position. You can kind of control this a bit because it is going to work into each other. And you can see it's melting a little bit together there. And I'm just going to use my scribe tool to pull down. Voila, knit pattern. From there, you can kind of work where you're most comfortable. We've already created our guidelines. I'm going to work on this side. And I'm going to start smaller at the top because of that section there. I'm going to do one at the top and then come down instead of two. Just gives me a little more room. And you can turn your cookie as you go, especially when you're working on curve. But this is and you can go back in and fix this. But this is a really great technique to do on cookies at Christmas with stockings or mitts. You don't have to keep doing on every side. Like if it looks good as it is, just leave it as is. But come in with your scribe tool and fix anything you don't like. And it's actually great if your icing is a little too loose. You can let it set and crust just a smidge. Like if you go onto another line and come back and use the scribe tool, you'll get more definitive texture without ruining it. Okay, so I'm going to start. You can kind of drag down into the icing as well. And you can see I'm kind of working continuously, and I'm actually pulling icing back up to do the next section, but that's okay because you're going right over top of it. And you can come back in if you want to create a little balance. Now, you don't have to do those guidelines if you don't want to. You can just work with the, if you worked with the scribe tool or an edible marker to create your lines, you can just work with that. I just find it gives me a little extra, almost leverage in the icing the way it sits. And if you see areas you don't like, just go in and squeeze just a titch more. And I do feel like my edges are a little bit bare. So it depends on how much you squeeze out. So I'm going to do like this one, and I'm just going to create a little single edged border. And came off my cookie there. Yeah. And I'm trying to see how I can show this on the, and you don't have to start right at the top, but I just feel like it needs something. So I'm just going to create a little single teardrops instead of working back and forth. It's almost like I'm doing the one side of the knit, just to give it a little definition and finish it off. I always have trouble working on this side, so this one's going to be a little wonky. Squeeze and pull, squeeze and pull, squeeze and pull. And just fix up any edges that you don't like. Perfect. Now you can go in and create like a stem if you want to in the brown. It's not needed, just a little zigzaggy. But those are done, and that's the next trio in that collection. So guys, today, I don't know if I'm going to get these all on the shot here, but today you did a whole set. And this is what I was saying about looking at them all together, is if you don't like an individual cookie, that's okay, because quite often the collection itself is beautiful. So well done. Thanks for watching. That was a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to doing my workshops over the next couple of weekends. And I'm going to be putting these DIY kits with this video link out there for people locally. Have a beautiful day.